Welcome to Young Money with Tracy Bissett, the advice show for young millionaires in the making. It's time for some $1 Million Straight Talk with Tracy, President and Chief Financial Fitness Trainer at Bissett Financial Fitness. Each week, Tracy's going to tell you what you need to know now at the beginning of your earning curve. Basic and advanced financial concepts made clear, healthy money habits and the missteps to avoid, and all the stuff that you can do to set yourself up for a future of fantastic financial freedom. Ready to lace up and start this week's financial fitness training? Let's do it, Tracy.
Welcome to the Young Money Podcast. I'm very excited. Today we have a very special guest, Ingrid Edstrom. Welcome to the show, Ingrid.
Thanks so much for having me, Tracy.
So Ingrid is the CEO of the award-winning consulting firm Polymath, LLC. Polymath's vision is to make the world a better place, built on a foundation of thriving small businesses. Ingrid loves doing this by taking topics that most business owners put on a scale from boring to terrifying and turning them into fun and rewarding part of entrepreneurship. She has been recognized as a top 100 QuickBooks ProAdvisor, one of the accounting profession's top 40 under 40, and as one of the most powerful women in accounting. When Ingrid is not teaching or playing her favorite video game, QuickBooks, she is usually playing Irish music or frolicking with her goats. So welcome again, Ingrid.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
Well, I'd love it if you can start by sharing with the listeners a little bit more about your company and really what a day in the life of Ingrid looks like.
Okay. So my business, Polymath, specializes in business strategy services for tours and activities companies. We've got a pretty honed niche in that industry and really focusing on how those businesses can understand their finances more effectively to be more successful and have a better understanding of their forecasts. A lot of tours and activities companies are seasonal businesses, so it's important to know how much money they need to set aside for the off season, as well as really keeping good track of their deposits and prepayments, because many tours accept payments from their customers well before the tour, and those payments are refundable until the tour happens. So teaching them how to effectively manage those more complicated aspects of their specific industry that a lot of businesses don't have to worry about, but that industry does. And in addition to that, I do a lot of education for small business owners through our YouTube channel, Ask A Bookkeeper. We're working to create for small business something like what Bill Nye does for science, taking the big, intimidating ideas that scare people away from following their dreams and making them more approachable, digestible, and fun. And we do it with puppets. It's like Sesame Street for small business owners. So that's one of the ways that we give back to our community. And then in addition to that, I do a lot of teaching with accounting professionals at various accounting conferences.
Excellent. And so on a day-to-day basis, would you be interacting with animals?
I have quite a menagerie here in Southern Oregon. We've got a small 2-acre farm with goats and chickens and rabbits, and we have a lot of fun.
Very good. And so I really like what you were saying about the show that you've got on YouTube, Ask a Bookkeeper, and how you're doing it with puppets. Is that how you're known, kind of as the Bill Nye of the accounting world or the bookkeeping world?
Actually, my title is Priestess of Profits.
Excellent. Well, that certainly conjures up positive images and something really great, as opposed to thinking about that kind of stuff in a negative or scary light.
Yeah. If anything, I like to think of myself as more the Jim Henson of the accounting world, though I have had a couple of people refer to me as the Oprah of the accounting world. That seems a little, Oprah's got big shoes to fill.
Yeah, I was going to say that is a huge compliment, whoever passed that on to you. So you want to keep them around. So when you think about your life, and certainly you've had a lot of success to date, a lot of varied experiences, have there been any themes or key success factors that have showed up regularly as you've gone on to do different things?
Oh, yeah, there's so many. I started as a bookkeeper in 2008, actually right as everyone else was shutting their doors and markets were crashing and things like that. I took a look around myself and said, I think I can help these people. And that's when I opened my business as a bookkeeper, was in 2008 during the midst of the crash. And from
I'm just
there,
going to jump in there for a second because
yeah,
our audience is young listeners or young money. And so for those who don't know, there was a big financial crisis, biggest one in all of our memories and certainly lifetimes, which severely impacted markets, companies, and with big effects in the US particularly, but some effects in Canada here as well.
yeah. So there was a lot of disruption going on, and I thought I can probably help people. And just started a bookkeeping business and started to help people organize their finances and try to stay more on top of how they could weather this storm that was going on. And from there, I just kept getting more specialized and focused on which clients I really enjoyed working with and what areas of accounting I particularly enjoyed and wanted to specialize in. And I think as far as the top success factors, the main things that come to my mind is it's really important to follow your passion. If you're not having fun with what you're doing, what's the point? And again, it can often come up. Entrepreneurs often feel like we own a job, and it's important to set aside time to work both in our business and on our businesses. And remember that deeper why we started the business. For anyone who maybe has read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, it's a fantastic one for thinking about that and just letting that why, that deeper motivation ground us into what it is we are really trying to create and letting that passion fuel us on the regular basis. And if we lose sight of that passion, that's a pretty big clue that maybe we're not going in the right direction, that we've lost that deeper motivation. Another one is I found it's really important to maintain a win-win mindset. There's a really common limiting belief. Actually, I think all of our human limiting beliefs are rooted in this deeper limiting belief in a zero-sum game. This idea that in order to win, somebody else has to lose, that if you want your slice of the pie, then you've got to fight for it and compete with other people. And I don't believe there's any such thing as competition. If we can maintain a win-win mindset and recognize that if we want a bigger slice of the pie, let's get together as friends and make some pie. That's a lot more fun. And it keeps us focused on thinking outside the box to create opportunities where everyone benefits rather than competing with each other and thinking that we have to fight so hard for what it is we're working to create. It's a lot more fun and rewarding. And I think that that's one of the main things that we could really use to shift in our business culture in the world is this idea that, we've got to compete for all these things. And that's, I think, one of the biggest success factors that we need to shift.
I really appreciate what you said, and I really applaud that. And certainly we've talked about it on the show around how you're thinking about money mindfulness, and even the idea of being kind to others and giving away services, as another guest had kind of coined it. But the reason that there's so much room, especially in a financial coach or financial advisor space, whether it be on the business side or the personal side, is that there's somebody out there for everybody, and there's room for everybody to find their people. And so just like you said, it's not that I'm trying to necessarily take someone else's clients. Let's all do the best job that we can and attract the people who are more naturally aligned with each of us. And then everybody's going to win.
Exactly right. And I think that applies to pretty much any industry. For myself, I know other accounting professionals that specialize in the tours and activities industry. And I reach out to them and we collaborate. We find ways that we can pass each other clients. And it's all about finding the best fit for the client, recognizing that sometimes that fit is a specific system or process or a deeper niche within the tours and activities industry. And sometimes it's a communication fit. It may be that, I have a communication nuance that's going to drive somebody absolutely crazy, or level of patience or tech savvy. There are so many different factors to focus on. And there is no reason for any of us to take on a client that isn't going to be a favorite client. If we can each focus on deeper relationships with fewer clients, those deeper relationships will be worth more and provide better value to both sides. And that's, I think, where we can really focus. And so I collaborate with the other accounting professionals who focus on the tours and activities industry. And we have a lot of fun together. We're getting together, we're making more pie, we're creating education opportunities to help the industry as a whole. And as a result, I've been getting to focus more exclusively on international travel. So safari companies, US-based businesses operating tours in other countries, and the really unique issues that creates as far as foreign currencies and moving money all over the world and things like that. Whereas a couple of these other accounting professionals, they focus a bit more, one specializes more on the activity side. So like gondola tours and more activity focused zip lines, things like that. And another one really enjoys the outfitters. So rafting guides, hunting guides, and that edge of things. And if you think about it, each of those business models is very different. So we can specialize more deeply, even though it's within a single industry, we still each get to work on just our ideal clients. And it's a lot more fun.
And I'm sure it's really great experiences for the client as well, because they're getting someone who works with them, who really gets them and their business needs and can help them without having to go through a lot of kind of standard, maybe technical stuff that's not as relevant.
Exactly. Someone who speaks their language and is very familiar with their unique special tools, because the tools for a rafting trip are extremely different from the tools for a walking tour or a safari.
Absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. I had kind of interrupted you a little bit before when I wanted to jump in. Were there any other success factors that have been a theme for you, or is collaboration kind of that third one?
Well, I think the last one is, speaking of those complicated tools, keep things simple. Life gets complicated enough all on its own, and it sometimes those complications, we can get carried away. So trying not to introduce unnecessary complication, and when things start to feel like they're getting complicated, focusing on how to simplify. That can really be the one thing sometimes, is how can we make this simpler? Sometimes that's introducing a software, but at the same time, software can also complicate things. So taking the time to evaluate your systems and think about what's going to make things easier, what's going to save time, and also save frustration.
Yeah, that's pretty important, especially when it comes to numbers, because sometimes people are already apprehensive enough. You don't want to add anything else to it that's going to make it unpleasant. You want to make it easy and simple to understand.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. And so certainly, just to recap those things that have shown up in your life and contributed to your current level of success, and I'm sure will be your future, is, and we can hear it in your voice, that first one, following your passion, working with people you're very interested in, people that you want to serve and you want to help, maintaining that win-win mindset. And it sounds as though you're thinking about, how can I do that and make a big impact around the world, not just in your local area. And finally, to keep things simple. Things don't need to be complicated, even if we have the ability to do things on a complex basis or in a complex way. Sometimes the simpler way is better. And certainly those listening, if you adopt one or all of those key success factors, those will certainly help you in your journeys to wherever you're on your way, whether it's through school, whether it's in corporate environment, or you're starting or working in your own business. So thanks for sharing those, Ingrid.
My pleasure.
Now, I'd love it if you can share with us a big turning point or a revelation for you that happened in your financial life. And I know, because you've already kind of laid the groundwork and let us know about your bookkeeping training and accounting work, that you had a better handle on numbers than others. But is there anything that comes to mind when you think about big revelations or things you wish you knew earlier?
Oh, there's so many. So many. I think the main thing is, we each need to ask ourselves, what is success to me? And recognize that this can change over time. And for me, my ideal company has evolved multiple times and recently did again. And we each need to be true to ourselves to ensure that we're working toward our current and future dreams, not working toward the shoulds of the past or what other people are telling us we should do and what success means to them. And that's been a really big journey for me over the last 10 years as I've been in business. Oftentimes entrepreneurs start a business diving into what everyone else says that they should do in order to have a successful business and what it means to have a successful business. And they're looking for the guidebook on what steps to follow.
Yes.
And when it comes right down to it, this is a very individual journey. And advice from others can be helpful to an extent. It still needs to remain an individual journey. And by using other people's measuring sticks of what success means, we often lose sight of what it is we really want and why. And for me, starting my business in 2008, like I mentioned, I dove into creating a bookkeeping business like any other bookkeeping business, or so I thought, until I realized that there were a lot of different ways to go about it. And there was a huge learning curve and not a whole lot of information out there. And that as I was making things up as I go, I was actually making things up a little bit more effectively than what the standard modes of doing things were, which is part of how I got the recognition that I did in the accounting industry and started teaching at accounting conferences. Is people started looking to me to ask me, what am I doing? And the most common thing that I teach them is, what do you want? Should is a dirty 6-letter word. I don't like it when people should on me, and I'm guessing that most people don't. So now whenever I hear the word should, I ask myself, what do I want? And what I wanted recently changed. Actually, it changed a while ago, but I didn't realize that it had changed. So as I mentioned, I started my business in 2008, and that first 4 years was a solopreneur working from home, doing basic bookkeeping for a variety of clients, and then got an office space in 2012 and hired my first employee. And the next several years was spent learning how to be an employer. And boy, was that a kick in the bottom line. And the things that we need to learn to be able to be effective employers. And one of my favorite lessons there, for anyone who's read Bob Burg and Don David Mann's book, The Go-Giver, it's one of my favorites. And they talk about the 5 laws of stratospheric success. And the 5th of those laws is the law of receptivity. Now, the law of receptivity is a little different from the law of reciprocity. Law of reciprocity, we all know what goes around comes around. It's kind of the golden rule. I scratch your back, you scratch mine, do unto others as you want them to do unto you. That's reciprocity. But the law of receptivity states that in order to truly and effectively give of ourselves, we first must be open to receiving. If we're not open to receiving the abundance that's coming our way from all of our good hard work, then we're blocking our own flow. And so many of us have this mindset thinking that we need to basically martyr ourselves, sacrifice our own health, well-being, happiness in order to be entrepreneurs. And that is not an effective mindset to have. We have to put on our own oxygen mask before we can help the people around us. And I remember the moment when I was listening to The Go-Giver in the car on a 30-something hour drive from Oregon to Minnesota. And I heard the law of receptivity for the first time. And I immediately backed up the recording and listened to it again because it hit me like a clue by 4. I realized that that was what I had been doing wrong for a couple years leading up to that point. Things like giving a crappy employee 10 chances to figure things out and make things right out of a false sense of loyalty to that person when they couldn't care less about me and my business, and not paying myself in the process in order to give them these more chances. And here I thought that that was how we could build loyalty with our employees. And boy, was I wrong. I had chosen the wrong employees. And it took me a really long time to figure out how to choose what I thought were the right employees. But also we need to recognize when we're hiring teams that each of our lives change and our goals change. And I had an employee that was working really well with me to the point where I made her a business partner. And then her life started changing and her needs were changing and my needs were changing and we were growing apart, but we didn't want to recognize that we were growing apart. And it really just kind of, we came to the understanding that, wow, you know, this has really kind of run its course and the season needs to end just a few months ago. And I think we could have saved ourselves a lot of money and hardship if we'd been willing to look at that more objectively a couple years ago. So that's been a really big turning point for myself, is realizing that I was holding to the ideal of having a larger team and that meant success. And in the meantime, I didn't realize that I was basically carrying somebody else. And sometimes we don't realize that we're carrying somebody until we set them down. We can move so much faster. And it's so much has opened up for me since that transition. And just recognizing that my business has much simpler needs, getting back to keeping things simple. Life with my business partner had gotten extremely complicated. And shifting things to make them simple again, to just take care of my needs and make sure that my clients are taken care of, has freed up a lot of time and creative bandwidth. And I'm really, really grateful for that difficult transition, another growth experience. Thanks, universe. But at the same time, those challenges put us exactly where we need to be. And we learn a lot more from our challenges and failures than we do from our successes.
Hello, Young Money listeners. You know that I love to talk about cash flow on the show. This episode of Young Money, featuring a fantastic entrepreneur, is sponsored by the masterclass, Can I Afford It? How to be certain of what you can and can't afford in your business in 5 minutes or less every time. This training has been specifically designed for entrepreneurs with sales in the 6 to 7 figure range to provide the 5 steps to cash flow clarity. If you are an entrepreneur with sales at these levels and want to make powerful money decisions, you do not want to miss this important masterclass. Head over to visitfinancialfitness.com/afford to register now. Stop asking yourself the question, can I afford it? So if I'm hearing all the clues you just left us as you talked about your experience, you were doing the should, which you always try not to.
Yep.
Measuring yourself to what somebody else has indicated is like that yardstick or benchmark of success, bigger team, bigger success. And by wanting to spare people's feelings and not really recognize issues necessarily as they were happening or just change in fit, it was costing you money. And so it's draining emotionally, it's draining the bank account. And so all of that kind of goes together. So I think one of the takeaways from your story, which I think is so great, in addition to learning from whatever situation you're in, is just to listen to your gut. And really, if you feel like something's a little bit off, dig into it and don't try to just push it aside, is what I heard.
Absolutely right. Listen to your gut. And also recognizing that even the people that you work with to help you with your finances, say if someone in our audience is working with a financial professional, recognizing that they're likely an entrepreneur or an employee also. And while we might look up to them and get advice from them, that's great. Still follow your gut and dig into deeper conversations about where you want to go and why. It's so important because everyone is building the plane as they fly it. There's nothing written in stone. And we're all kind of making this up as we go. And while some people may be seeming to make it up more effectively than others, comparison is the thief of joy. And if we're comparing what works for us to what works for somebody else, we might be missing something. And in addition to that, recognizing that there might be things that the people that we look up to are unaware of, or that they haven't figured out. And each of our individual experiences has merit. So really taking a good hard look at who we're putting on a pedestal and recognizing that, yes, well, it's good to look up to people and to take advice from others when it's useful for us. Take it all with a grain of salt and recognize that your way might be the best way for you. And that we just need to look at the entire picture, and sometimes we might be missing things.
Absolutely. And I love how you reiterated that business owners, great, take advice, but you've still got to make the calls. You still got to make the decisions, listen to your gut. And so to that end, love to just segue into our next kind of areas of conversation, which is your expertise working with business owners. And so if we've got some listeners who've tuned in and they're thinking about starting a new business, whether it's in addition to a job that they're holding, whether it's corporate, if they're going to do it on the side or it's going to be their full-time thing. If they want to set things up properly from a financial perspective as they get started, what sorts of things would you recommend to them?
I recommend making sure that you've got your business and personal finances separate, different bank accounts, and never let the two meet.
That's great advice.
Make sure that they're separated. So open a business bank account and do all of your business transactions from that account and all of your personal transactions from your personal accounts. And when it's time to move money from one to the other, do it as a transfer. So if you need to invest money into your business, then transfer money from your personal account into your business account and record that as an owner investment. When it's time to pull money out of your business, depending on what your business entity setup is, either as a draw or as payroll, making sure that that is being done and recorded correctly and not just doing, swiping that debit card for the business on your personal card or from the personal account or for personal expenses on your business. Because if you think of it, if you're swiping your business card for personal expenses and you're just like, oh, I'll just record it in my system as a draw. Each time you do that, that's basically a paycheck. And what that does is make it so that we're nickel and diming ourselves. And it's really hard to feel the success and abundance coming into our lives when we pull that money out one transaction at a time. Whereas if we're actually transferring money from our business to our personal, it makes it much easier to budget both on the business side and on the personal side so that you know how much money you need to fund your personal life. And you also have a much better pulse on how your business is doing.
I think that's great for all of the reasons that you highlighted. Any other tips for people who want to start right? That's a great one, doing those accounts.
Yep. So setting a real bookkeeping system up from the get-go. Software doesn't have to be incredibly expensive. Like you mentioned in my bio, QuickBooks Online is my favorite video game. So that's the one that I like best.
Even though I do use it.
There are a lot of different options out there, and people will find other options that may work better or worse for them. It's all about finding the right tool that fits your hand and makes sense to you. And so some people might like Xero or Wave. I do recommend using an accounting platform that is a true double entry accounting platform. So some invoicing tools like FreshBooks, they're really just invoicing tools. They don't have the ability to create a balance sheet. And it's important to be able to get full financial statements from your accounting system. And that's something that a lot of people don't think about when they're first getting started. They think, oh, someday I'll grow into that. But then they end up maintaining this kind of baby starter system that they got going with. Well, what happens a couple years down the line when your business is doing well and you want to buy a house? The bank is going to ask you for your business's financial statements. And if you're not using a system that can produce those effectively for you, you're going to find yourself in a complicated situation.
So just to ask a couple questions on what you said, because some people may not be familiar with everything you just ran through. When you were mentioning the softwares that are good and double entry bookkeeping, can you explain that really simply?
Oh boy. There is not really a good way to explain double entry bookkeeping really simply. That's one of those areas where accountants learn this stuff so that you don't have to.
So perhaps best advice would be, if you're not sure, ask your accountant.
Yeah, ask your accountant.
What they would prefer you use so they can do your statements well for you.
The main thing is that a double entry bookkeeping system is a system that uses transactions that are recorded in debits and credits, where there is a balancing transaction to everything that we do. And that's what it means by double entry is, so for example, if you have an expense coming out of your bank account, then you would see that money coming out of your bank account and going to that expense on your profit and loss or income statement. And that in and out is what makes it double entry. The main thing is that most business owners do not need to clearly understand all of the ins and outs of debits and credits and how they flow to operate a healthy business. You started your business because you have a passion and something that you want to do, and it probably wasn't accounting. So let the software do the heavy lifting in that area. You don't have to be able to read the Greek to keep up with that part. Yeah, the
Absolutely.
important thing is to find a system that's going to actually work. And the easiest ones that come off the top of my head are QuickBooks Online, Xero, and Wave, QuickBooks being my favorite. And one thing to think about, so QuickBooks Online, Simple Start, Essentials, and Plus are the main QuickBooks Online programs. There's also a QuickBooks Online self-employed version that has some double entry components, but I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it myself recently because I don't support that program with my clients. But last I checked, it couldn't produce a balance sheet. So I would recommend starting with QuickBooks Online Simple Start, because last I checked, you couldn't transition from the self-employed version of QuickBooks Online to Simple Start. So you'd have to basically end one set of books and start a new one, and just trying to make things as easy as possible for yourself.
Also, you may think you're saving money by doing kind of a scaled down version, but I've seen so many entrepreneurs who end up spending a lot of money later to recreate the bookkeeping they needed 2-3 years ago. And so spend the money, do it properly, and then you'll have the numbers as you need to. Like you were saying, if you need to go get financing, if you need to be able to demonstrate what your company's been up to, you've got your records.
Well, and the money to recreate it later is one thing. It's also the time in the moment. If there is a piece of software that is going to save you time, it is probably worth the investment.
Very good. Now, are there any common missteps or things you see new entrepreneurs do that you would wish you could have given them advice before they did it or they started?
Yeah. Well, I think we just covered a couple of them as far as not getting your books set up from the beginning. And then I think that leads to the next really big one, is that people procrastinate. If you don't get your books set up right from the beginning, and then it becomes this big unknown, and we have a fear of the unknown. And we just, it turns into that paper monster that's sitting in the drawer or the shoebox, and you just don't even want to look at it. And it brings up feelings of shame. And those things really just get in our way. And the longer we put it off, the worse it gets. And those problems end up feeling larger than life. When that happens, get help, whether it be from an accounting professional who can take some of that off your hands, or an accountability ally who will hold you to getting it done. Even if it's, you know what, you and me, we've got the same problem. We're going to do it together, and we'll learn and grow together and figure it out. We really just have to jump in and do it. And procrastination is probably one of the biggest things that I think contributes to businesses failing.
Yeah, because certainly if you're not knowledgeable about what's been going on, you're probably not making remittances to the government as you're supposed to be. So you might be getting in trouble with them. You're also imagining the worst, which may or may not be true, but because you don't know, you can't actually make any changes in your business because you're not sure.
Exactly right.
So it's better to know what you're dealing with, good or bad, so then you can actually start making some concrete action plans to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, because you work so often with business owners, are there any things that they tell you that are clearly misconceptions or truths they've got in their mind that you say, where did you learn that? You know, that's not true. Because I know that some people that I work with and I deal with regularly, they've got some ideas in their mind that they just heard and they believe them to be true that gets in the way sometimes of the financial aspects of the business.
Oh, once again, there's a lot of them. You know, some of them are smaller things within the software and such that would need to be explained. You know, that's a lot of questions. This is one of the reasons why we created the Ask a Bookkeeper show, is to clear up some of those misconceptions. So there are some fun, easy things that we explain on there, such as the difference between cash basis and accrual basis, and what those terms mean, and making them easier and more approachable. And I think that that's one area that a lot of businesses struggle with, is imposter syndrome. You know, there's this kind of general feeling that once you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, that everybody expects you to know everything there is about running a business. And I can tell you right now that nobody does know everything about running a business, but yet we've got this fear of judgment in our minds, and it's really holding us back. So we created the Ask a Bookkeeper community to release us from that fear of judgment and make it easier to be able to ask any questions. So any misconceptions that people aren't sure about, I would love to direct them toward that YouTube channel a little bit and encourage them to check some of those things out.
I'll certainly within the show notes put the link to that so that people can easily access it.
Oh, great. Yeah. It's askabookkeeper.com. Can find our
Perfect.
Facebook group and our YouTube channel. So those are some of the misconceptions about smaller things on the business side. But I think the deeper misconceptions are things that are more the ingrained cultural mores that we learn from our parents and teachers, adults as we're growing up, what money and finance really mean. And when it comes right down to it, money is energy. It is the tangible energy that we use to bring the things that we want and need into our lives. But it is something that we as human beings made up. It is something that we invented. It is a concept that does not have a true physical form. Yes, there are paper and coin representations of it, but the value of money is the value that we place on it. And a lot of our misconceptions around money and value and how those things affect our self-worth and the way that we perceive our own personal value can be really detrimental. And I think it's important to recognize that money is a tool that we use for certain things, and that if we blow it up to make it larger than life, that it's going to intimidate us. And a lot of kind of poverty mindset concepts come out of that idea when it comes to ideas of you have to spend money to make money. Once again, that's an idea that's rooted in a zero-sum game. It's not win-win. There are a lot of ways to make money that don't require the expenditure of money. We just need to get creative. And ideas of being penny rich, pound poor. And there are so many different misconceptions around the idea of money and finance in general. And I think that talking about these ideas and recognizing that somebody who has a lot of money does not make them any better or worse than anybody else, or even more powerful than anyone else. That what they have in the bank is a number on a digital form. It can't, yes, it can be used to procure goods and services, but the money itself doesn't really have any value except for what we choose to give it.
Absolutely. And I think that's so fantastic the way that you phrased it. It's really important to open those dialogues and to get people talking, because the more that we talk about money, the less power it's going to hold. And then we can view it more objectively as this tool we use to bring things in and out of our lives. But we can keep it in its proper place and not let it kind of take over everything that we're doing.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. Now, I'd love it if, before I let you go, if you wouldn't mind sharing any final pieces of advice for the listeners, or if there's anything you want to reiterate to them to make sure that they've really heard you.
Oh, I think the main things are kind of getting back to the success factors that we were talking about before. It really is all about finding your passion, maintaining a win-win mindset, and seeing how we can help each other, how we can work together to create a rising tide that raises all ships, and trying not to overcomplicate those things. I think that those are really the most important things, that if we can hang on to those, and it can be tricky sometimes. I mean, just from the story that I was just sharing is of my recent separation from my business partner and how what I had wanted changed and that I didn't realize it right away. We each need to be asking ourselves on a really regular basis, what is success to me? What is it that I want to be doing with my time, and what's going to bring me the most fulfillment? That's something that I often think about, is that people think about the pursuit of happiness. Being in America, we hear it all the time, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
And happiness is an emotion, which is balanced by so many other emotions. And it's one to choose from. Whereas just a couple weeks ago, a friend and client of mine was going through an experience. His stepmother passed away, and he had the opportunity to be with his grieving father. And the depth of connection and relationship that was established, and the opportunity to spend that important time with family, I think most of us wouldn't necessarily qualify that as happiness, but there's a deeper fulfillment that goes along with that I think is more important than happiness. And if we can focus on what is going to help us to feel that deeper fulfillment in our lives, what is it that each of us is working to build and why? Can we find our purpose on this planet and exercise that purpose through the work that we're doing? And I think that that is where keeping things simple starts to make those pieces a bit more clear, rather than getting wrapped up in all the shoulds and the judgments and everyone else's idea of success. What's going to feel fulfilling to you?
Very good. And it certainly gives us so much to think about in our own lives and where we want our lives to go. So thank you for that, Ingrid. So before I let you go, love for you to share with the listeners what you're working on now and where they can go to learn more about you and your company.
Oh boy, what I'm working on now. Well, that's an exciting thing because with this big transition that I've been going through, I'm actually going on a bit of sabbatical. And I told myself I wasn't going to take on any new clients. And then I met a really great potential client that I just couldn't turn down because we hit it off so well. So I'm taking on very few. I'm being very selective about the new clients that I do take on. And I'm writing a book.
Excellent.
I'm starting to delve into writing about that concept of creating win-wins and how that can be applied in our lives. And I really think that if we can focus on creating win-wins in every interaction that we have with others, as well as within ourselves, because oftentimes the limiting beliefs that we have, the saboteurs that we have in the backs of our heads that cut us down, making us think that we have to sacrifice something in order to get what we really want, that is a win-lose, a zero-sum game idea that we were trained into from a very young age. And those are things that I think that we can get past. And so I'm digging into the deeper psychology of those ideas and how we can work together, because I think that by focusing on creating win-wins, it's going to solve a lot of the issues that we currently have going on within our society on a political and economic standpoint, as well as the way that we are using up our planet in ways that if we keep going on the current track, we're going to end up killing ourselves off. And that's not effective. That's not a long-term win. So focusing on win-wins and longer-term focused vision of what it is we're working to create together and why.
Well, that sounds fantastic. So we'll have to have you back once you've got your book finished.
That sounds like tons of fun.
Got any timeline on that? So we'll let you have your sabbatical and do your book. We'll keep in touch.
Thanks so much, Tracy. This was great fun.
Really wonderful to have you, Ingrid. Thank you for joining us. I know that there's a lot of things that I'm taking away from what you said. The one I chuckled when you said it, but I certainly jotted it down. And it's something that I think we all need to remember is that should is a dirty 6-letter word. And so we all know that, we all feel that, and yet we still allow shoulds and other people's ideas to kind of influence what we're doing. So I think being true to ourselves, as you've mentioned, listening to our guts, and focusing on the simple will allow us to make choices, whether it's in our careers or in our businesses, that make sense for us, even just in the day-to-day management of our own money. So maybe there's milestones that people in your family think you're supposed to be reaching from a financial standpoint. Maybe you need to set your own path. And so there's no one way for success to come. Love the tips that you shared about what people should be doing if they're thinking about starting a business on the side or for it to be their main occupation. And certainly love those misconceptions that you talked about, and really just delineating that money is a tool and we need to view it as such and not let it be this thing that kind of overruns our lives. So thanks again so much for joining us, Ingrid.
My pleasure. This was lots of fun. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. So there you have it, listeners. Ingrid Edstrom, CEO of the award-winning consulting firm Polymath, LLC, and also the creator of AskABookkeeper.com, the online education series. Until next time, take good care and stay financially fit.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. To all you millionaires in the making out there, If you love this podcast, please subscribe on iTunes to keep your financial fitness training going. Oh, and leave us a review. And be sure to visit 2 S's, 2 T's, financialfitness.com to take your free financial fitness assessment. Find out how financially fit you really are. See you next week, young millionaires to be.